Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Fraud Michael Skiba here. I'd like to welcome you to DFTV episode number 12. So this is probably going to be our last episode for the year. So thank you all for all the support throughout the year. We're going to kick off with a great agenda. We already have some great topics and speakers lined up for next year. So definitely stay tuned there and keep those ideas coming as well. I love getting feedback from everybody on new topics, new cases, new speakers, and we're going to get off and running for next year for sure. So this episode is really exciting, and I want to welcome. I have a special guest today. This is Eric Rodriguez. So Eric is joining us. We're going to be talking about a exciting case of Anna Sorokin. So this was back in 2016 that this whole kind of scam ensued, and we're going to be really picking this apart from many different angles. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're gonna, like I said, really dive into this. I know you've got with your background, looking for your insights as well, and we're going to try to pick this apart and try to kind of analyze if we want to the mind of this scammer. So Eric has about a 36-year background in financial crime. He has, I think, just about every certification that there is, including CFE, CFCS, and many more. He is the president of the ACFE Heartland chapter, and he has done a lot of international consulting. He is a well sought after speaker as well, and guest lecturers also at the University of Omaha. So definitely looking forward to your background in financial crime here to, like I said, to explore this topic. So Eric, let's just dive right into this right off the bat. And also, too, I want to let everybody know the chat is open. We're going to be monitoring that. Thank you for your questions ahead of time. I have those all queued up and ready to go. So we're going to get to those throughout the session as well. But definitely, we love chatting with everybody. So definitely feel free to engage with us, throughout the next half hour or so. So Eric, this case is really interesting. It kind of came across my desk because I thought, being a New Yorker myself, and I know you have a history here as well. I think, we understand kind of how that inner circle, if you will, kind of operates in New York. And I think that was one of the whole, basis for the fraud and how that kind of blossomed or bloomed in this case. Right. And it's not unique just in New York. Of course, these types of environments exist in many different areas, in the States and in the world, actually. So, when we started to look in this case, we thought it was interesting because, it follows a lot of the same patterns that we see, in our fraud world as well, at the corporate level and things like that. But this was different, so she apparently, she claimed that she was walk through some of the facts. So she was an art collector, and apparently she had duped. So the final result, which was good, she was arrested and sentenced. And I think the final tally was over 200,000. I think the numbers were around 260, about $250,000 that she was able to actually scam. So, with these type of schemes, I think it's the way that they escalate. Let's start there with how it starts. What are your thoughts on? Taking all your experiences, corporate level, private level. If you can, analyze her. Does it follow a pattern you normally see in fraudsters you've come across?
Well, this one was a little bit interesting because many of the times when you see fraud cases, the fraud case is more about, stealing and getting gains, not to make yourself known, but just to have that money, to steal that money without being known who you are. In this case, she was building a persona, someone else, and made herself well known, being in these big circles with these socialites, so it's not like no one would know who she is. She was in the spotlight all the time. So that was kind of a little bit of an interesting twist there because she was letting everyone know who she was. Although, she changed her identity a little bit by changing her last name. But so in that aspect, it was different. But in the aspects of the types of fraud she did or committed, it was your basic frauds, using those checks to cash, kiting them from one bank to the other and trying to get that money out before the bank realized that the checks were no good. So I would say in that aspect, it was different than your normal frauds or normal identity theft because it was more personal.
And it's interesting. I tried to dive into her personal background, and I couldn't find too much information. I didn't, I didn't put the full blown search in, but with just what I could find, I couldn't really find much about her background. Apparently she was from Russia originally, here on an expired visa. And so there was really not much of a paper trail of her activity here that I could find. But I personally was interested in her background and just kind of seeing what kind of environment she was brought up in, because a lot of times what we see is maybe in a situation like this, there could be a sense of frustration, where you might have someone that was brought up in an environment where they had all these great things, but then, they were forced to work for them on their own. It's not working out. It's too hard. And then they, resort back to, the illegitimate means to get them. But I couldn't really find much in the background that would kind of, shed light on that, on what was the motivation, the original motivating factors, if there were any stressors that she was bringing to the table early on.
Yeah. I mean, I did see some articles. I dug in a little bit more, and like you said, she's from Russia. She went to Germany, and then from Germany came to New York. And it seemed like in Germany, she lived outside a small town. I can't remember the name of it, but it was outside of Cologne out there. And a lot of when they interviewed some of her friends or some of the people that she knew back then, they all said that a lot of them were also duped from her. Not in the sense of not knowing who she was because they knew her back there, but as far as little financial trickeries, getting them to lend her money and not getting it back, or getting them to buy something and never getting paid for it. So it looks like this habit of hers started way back when she was young.
So how I mean, that statement we have said so many times in our world, our corporate fraud world, it starts small and then it grows big, right? I mean, I was just doing some work for a huge company last week, and that's exactly what the main takeaway that I had to them is that most of the frauds the biggest frauds that I have seen have started very small. I mean, there's different buckets, of course, but
Right.
But a lot of them I've seen are opportunities that start, like you said. I mean, maybe in elementary school, she was duping her teachers out of pencils and things like this,
Right.
But I mean, that's just the mentality. Some people have that inborn, just the makeup. And what I have seen from a perspective, actual psychological perspective, is that individual is kind of rare per se, because what we usually see is what I've seen is a lot has to do with opportunity. You might have someone that's legitimate, if you will, or doesn't engage in behavior, but all of a sudden an opportunity presents itself to them, and then they take advantage of it, and then it grows. I think that's the majority of fraud cases that I have seen. So I think hers was, she fits that psychological profile of, and I know they related her to Bernie Madoff, and even Holmes too. They all have that certain psychological makeup that's prevalent very early on.
And you bring up a good point. Like you're saying in the corporate world, that we see a lot of that where it starts off small there as well. But other points to that is she's testing the waters on certain things. Pushing those boundaries to see where she can get by. And that's what a lot of people would do in the corporate world. If we don't have those controls in place, then there's an opportunity. Someone's going to take it. But, if we know that it's being policed there and it's being looked at, more than likely you won't. So, but in her case, if we look at it, the only policing would have been the group she hung out with. They should have known who she was, what circle she was, but she played it very well. And, everyone knew just a little bit about her, that it painted this picture amongst everyone, which was smart of her.
Right, absolutely. And I think, when you look at, again, kind of making the parallel into the corporate world, I mean, one of the biggest, in financial crime, one of the biggest kind of escalations we often see is expense account padding, right? I mean, this is huge. because it often starts with just, you know, a couple employees. I mean, one of the biggest cases I had, that's how it started. You know, two field employees, they were sales reps, and you know, one was new and one was seasoned, and the new guy was kind of trained and taught how to pad that expense account so he could actually, you know, make a lot more money than you know what he's making. But what's interesting is well, in that specific case, that just grew because, you know, from there it was, he had a lot of vendor relations as well, so he could take advantage of those. And as you mentioned, there was very limited checks and balances, and that was known by him. But it was funny because that new employee, I'm convinced he did not come in with that mentality, knowing that he wanted to defraud that company, you know, but he was kind of taught that by, you know, by a mentor, if you will, who was, you know, kind of presented it as, hey, this is how we normally do things here. And you know, he wanted to fit in, and then it just escalated, and that turned into one of the biggest cases I ever had. But you know, again, getting back to the psychological element of that, I mean, in that case, I mean, it was like risk reward, you know, but it was like positive reinforcement, right? I mean, it was like, if he's continually getting these, you know, getting money and goods and things like that, he's going to keep doing it, right? I mean, it's not like,
yeah, you got to keep doing it. You're going to keep, you know, you get, like you mentioned, that reward. You're going to see that, okay, you know, I'm making money, or I'm getting something from it, whether it's a trip, you know, an expensive meal at a restaurant, or, you know, staying at a nice hotel, whatever it is, you're enjoying those rewards. And as you get by them and they become easier, you know, you think you should continue to escalate and go even higher and try new rounds.
Right. Now, do you think, like with her, you know, look, okay, we'll assume her history is, you know, that this was always present in her, you know, at a very young age. Again, we can't really dive into the parental. That's one thing I always try to look at and analyze is, you know, what kind of family was she brought up in, how, you know, what kind of background, things like that. But let's assume that this is just, for some reason, genetic makeup and how, you know, how she is wired. I mean, in your opinion, do you see any chance to, you know, rehabilitate, to educate an individual like her, like Anna? Or, I mean, you know, in your experience with all the fraud investigations you've been involved in, or is it kind of, you know, something we always have to keep an eye on? Or we always keep an eye on her?
You know, I would say in her particular case, and not in all, but in hers, I would say it's something you want to probably keep an eye on always, because it's something that started really young. It became part of her life, her culture. And it was something that, you know, she felt that, you know, it was owed to her. So it became part of that life mentality. It wasn't like, oh, I need money right now because, you know, my son needs an operation, so I'm just going to do it once. You know, it's more, I really didn't need anything back then, but I can get it. So I want it. I'm entitled to it. So that, I think that type of emotional dependency on that is hard to break, because once you start doing it from such a young age, and it goes all the way to like where Anna was, you know, late in, till she was, what was she, 26 or 20? Yep. Yeah, about 26 when she was arrested. I mean, so she had a long stretch there. She got caught. And even when she got caught, you know, she still said, I'll do it again. You know, she had no remorse there. So when you look at that and you put that together, it's someone that you're going to probably want to keep an eye on, because it's something that's so ingrained in the fabric of her, you know, of who she is.
Right. And the, you know, an individual like that, in my experience as well, they will get used to that. You know, there's always a sense of that, you know, arrogance with this type of fraudster as well. You know, it's like, you know, the hunt, the chase, the adrenaline, whatever it is, it you know, there's a thrill element to it. You know, is you know, it's a constant theme. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, how would that be? You know, where will that gap be filled? If you know, in a legitimate manner, I don't know. You know, but trying to actually, you know, analyze that is definitely interesting. And you know, it's I was thinking about her friend, so it's interesting too. You know, Rachel Williams, who was one of her good, quote unquote, apparently good friends.
Yeah.
You know, and it goes back to like what we just spoke about. You know, about how there's no sense of, you know, the victim, like what the damage that's going to ensue, because I mean, here it is, her best friend. She traveled to Morocco apparently with her. And then kind of completely ditched her in Morocco with, I think it was like a $62,000 bill at this exclusive hotel. So there was just no, compassion, if you will, no identification with the victim. And I mean, even in other areas in the research I've done in other circles, we know that if there is a lack of identification with the victim, then it's almost anything goes, right? If you just don't have that wiring, you just really have that, we call it the don't care gene. It just doesn't, we can't understand that because we have compassion, but to those that have that gene, it's, simply, her best friend, she duped. So, it's just interesting when you look at that specific type of wiring. I've actually seen some interesting studies, nothing that I would, I would say be strong, as far as the exclusiveness of it, but about the biological factors with a lot of these scammers. And I looked at, there was a research study done that was out west about the talking about the actual like left brain, right brain, certain activities, and how certain criminals have activities in certain areas of their brain that others don't. So those anomalies that they're born with. So it's really interesting. I mean, we don't talk about that too much in corporate fraud, of course, but but it's still interesting to think about that, that someone can be born, if you will, with certain genetic factors that make them higher risk, if you will.
And she was smart how she played it as well, too, because I mean, if you think about it, $200,000 or $260,000, yeah, that's a lot of money, to you and I, to a lot of people, to most people. But if you go into that group of the socialites she hung out with, the trust fund babies, that's like maybe $200 to you and I. It's not a lot of money. So she was smart in being able to target that audience to know that, yeah, I'm getting these large amounts of money, but to them it's small. They won't realize it, or they won't, care as much about it. So that's another aspect to look at with her, who she targeted and how she got that money. Like you said, she went to a trip with a friend, stuck her with a bill, but her friend probably made a lot of money. So to her, it was probably not that much. Yes, she would want that money back. A restaurant meal at, one of the nice, elegant luxury restaurants might be like a $2,000 bill. It's a lot for you and I, but for someone in that makes that much money in that area, that's like a $50 bill for you and I. So, I mean, that's something to think about as well.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's what we call the fly under the radar, I mean, and we see that too, when we look at like analytical programs for banks and insurance companies. This is one of the things we always look for is those, the higher, higher quality kind of hits, like the low, if you have thresholds of $2,000, the ones that come in lower than that, because they, a lot of times, they're just not detected because they don't hit the certain threshold. So, but yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how, and one of the things too is, the media attention. So I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, this was only 2016, so it wasn't that long ago. And I even remember, when this case popped up, I remember seeing some of the footage and things about this. And I mean, how does when you talk about the media involvement, I mean, in a case like this, and considering her profile, right? I mean, she probably loved all this attention. She probably loved, going to court and having, needing security details to keep people, kind of under control. I mean, so is there a way to control that? I mean, what is your opinion on that? I mean, is it something where, we don't want to reward her for this activity by giving her that, that extra attention? I mean, how is there a way to control that, or, is it kind of a lost cause, if you will?
That's a good question because you're right. In her case, she feeds on that emotional need of, yes, I'm in the media. Yes, I'm in the spotlight. And you think about, okay, she only did $260,000 worth of damage, which is a lot. But still, what did she get? She got arrested, but now they're putting a movie together, which they paid her, I believe, $100,000 for Netflix. And then she gets a $7,500 royalty for it. And then every time they re-show that, or there's a series, about another 15,000. So I mean, if you look at it in those aspects, you're feeding more reward to this person. So you're kind of saying it's okay, because you're still going to make the money. I believe those type of actions should probably, that type of money, the actions the court should take is that money should go to the court, so it goes to the victims instead of to her. So I mean, there has to be changes in the laws to make this happen. Unfortunately, a lot of the statutes in fraud aren't as high or aren't as a deterrent as they should be, and that's something that we need to look at.
Absolutely, and I think that's when you think about, so she was sentenced, so it's $250,000, and she was sentenced to 12 years. I mean, and that's worth talking about for a minute too, is the deterrent factor, right? I mean, is that a deterrent? That kind of sentence for that crime. I mean, as you and I both know, and this is one of the pain points we feel with a lot of the cases we work with is we have a very strong investigation per se, but just the environment at the time is not conducive to actually pursue that case criminally, so we always wonder, well, what's, even though if it's a corporate investigation, there's a different mindset, different approach with that type of case. But from a criminal perspective, it's we often think of this, is it going to act as a deterrent if we get all the way there to the criminal, case, and then the case is dropped or it's not pursued? This message is very, very damaging. We know this, in our space, so there's two aspects to look at with deterrence is the general deterrent of the message it's sending to everybody, right? I mean, and then also the specific deterrent against her. I mean, what is this message going to show her? And I think that's one of the, again, main challenges, in my opinion, as well, is just the prosecutorial support and the legal environment, with these type of cases, because it never seems to be. I mean, for you and I, never seems to be enough. I don't know. I mean, but 12 years just seems a little on the light side to me. I know they had some charges that they couldn't get pursued and
Right.
kind of fell through the cracks for one reason or another. So, I mean, that always unfortunately does happen. But, I mean, are you seeing any trend from your space in, either an uptick or downtick in prosecutions and legal support?
Unfortunately, but I've been running across a lot, and I see it more, and I think it's more of an uptick as well. Is there has to be some sort of amount that has to be reached before they actually would provide the information or the support to be able to prosecute these, which I understand. The way the system is built, there's not enough investigators, prosecutors to try all these cases. There's other different types of cases like murder trials and other more heinous crimes that are out there, and I understand that. But they realize that and they use that to their advantage. So I'm seeing more of an uptick where we're seeing more crimes and they're being smart about it. They're staying under that radar, that threshold, so that they know they're not going to be picked on or bothered on, and that's increasing. And now with the pandemic, everyone's at home. A lot of people are bored. A lot of people are out of work. A lot of people are upset politically with different things. You're starting to see a little bit more of that fraud creeping, going up.
Yep. And, I think, what's interesting too is, when we talk about, prosecutions, one thing that we do know, which is unfortunate, is because there's an inconsistency. I mean, we don't have, every state is different, of course, with their approach, right? So we know this, in the organized criminal world. I mean, they know that certain states, don't have the resources, and that's what they're going to target. Well, the second there was a research study I was involved in California, and this was years and years ago, and it was at a county level, and they had 2 or 3 counties that really made a fraud, a high priority for prosecution. So in those areas, I think they saw like 15% decline, 20%. It was significant, right? But, what do you think happened in the counties outside of that? I mean, it was just it was unfortunate because they literally just sent them out of their counties, which, You know, and we see this. I mean, you and I both operate internationally. We see this all the time too. You know, they know which countries have really strong regulatory requirements, have strong investigators, and have, you know, insurance and banking support for these type of things. But, you know, and those are the areas that they target. So we know this, and the criminal element does too. You know, they know, just like we're monitoring new regulations, they know they do the same thing. They're having these same types of chats as well. You know, so
Yeah.
but it's you know, unfortunately, the trend is such that, you know, unless there's a consistency, which I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you really can't have a consistent, you know, I don't know if you had mandatory sentencing or some federal guidelines. I don't know. I mean, this would be a huge endeavor. But until something like that happens, you're simply going to get, you know, plugs in the dam, you know, and they're going to be sent elsewhere.
No, you hit it right on the head. You're right. You know, I work with small, you know, towns where there's not a lot going on. So if there's a fraud case, they're like, yeah, sure, we'll help you. You know, even if it's $440,000 or something like that. Where, you know, I've gone to big cities like in Los Angeles or New York City where it's, you know, $100,000. They're like, that's not a lot of money. You know?
Right.
We're dealing with other things in the millions here, billions here. They're really busy, but yeah, you hit it on the head. It's difficult. It's got to change, whether it's regulatory or you know, and in that federal level. You're right, because you can't have that inconsistency, or just as you mentioned, they're going to travel and move to those spots that they know they can get away with it. But it's unfortunate.
Right. No, exactly. And Eric, I don't want to run out of time here. I got a couple of questions to kind of throw out. So first question, great question, was what's the most common fraud that we're seeing right now? So I'll let you answer that one first. So what's the most common? I guess, you know, the corporate fraud level, not consumer fraud, corporate fraud.
Well, I mean, in corporate fraud, the business I work with, we have a lot of consumers, so it's identity theft for them. We're seeing a lot of that, but I know that involves more of the consumer and not the corporation. The other thing that I'm noticing really large, and it's getting bigger, is, believe it or not, it surprised me, but counterfeit checks.
Yeah,
that's big, because we moved into this new environment of everything's electronic now. That we're not really looking at those corporate paper checks as much as we did in the past. So yeah. I've seen a ton, and it's been rising even more and more, where checks with the company name are coming out, and it's not our good account number. It's a fake account number, and the check has been counterfeited. So that's growing. That's getting bigger in the corporate side.
And you know, it's funny you say that, because my opinion is almost exactly yours. I think, you know, identity theft really, you know, went from, because identity theft is, there's so many different mediums that can be delivered, and we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it from just Netflix emails being sent to UPS tracking to all the way to corporate level, the phishing campaigns. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's looking, you know, the fraudsters are looking to gain your identity. But I've also seen, you know, the mailers, you know, the fraud mailers. I mean, we're seeing a lot of those now, where these are being sent out from, you know, supposedly from the government, you know, with whatever benefits, right, or even insurance companies, you know, saying, oh yeah, here's your refund check, and click here, and then all of a sudden, you know, your whole system's compromised. So I mean, I'm seeing a mix as well, but I think the scammers are kind of, you know, using those multiple mediums, throwing out the net, if you will, and seeing who they can, you know, who they can grab. And then last question for you, Eric. What's the craziest fraud that you have ever seen, or ever been involved in?
Actually, I could say there was an interesting one where I was looking at an individual, and the way I caught them was through social media. As I was talking to them and they're trying to get away from it, I had the police involved with it as well. You know, she was chatting and asking advice through Twitter to a friend of hers, and we're seeing that because I was following her on Twitter. So she, you know, kept digging herself deeper and deeper, as, you know, she would give us the answers on the phone and then type away in Twitter to her friend saying, "Can you believe this? You know, they you know, I'm giving this information. They believe me." So she actually convicted herself with all the information that she provided through social media. So that was one of the most craziest cases that I ever worked on.
That's a good one. Did you get a good result on that one, hopefully?
Oh yeah, big conviction right away.
Ah, nice. Good, good. It was, that's a nice, yeah. As we talked about, the frustration that we feel a lot is those don't often end positively. So that's a good one. That's a, yeah, and social media too. I mean, that's a whole, we've done a couple episodes on that too. I mean, that's just for all the investigators out there, that's just a great area to, and unexplored still. I mean, you know, there's
a treasure trove of information out there.
And we're testing every day. Every day there's something new. We did the first episode we did back in the spring. It's you know, we've had to make 20 updates since what we talked about because there's just so many new things going on there. But Eric, listen, I want to say thank you so much. How can anyone reach you, Eric, for any questions or follow up?
The easiest way would be to look out on the web, ACFE Heartland chapter. We're out in Omaha, so if you just Google that on the webpage, my email address is there, president@heartlandacfe.com. And they can send me information there, or just go to the website and click a box there and send information to me on that website.
Fantastic, great, and yeah, great chapter. I've been involved with them too. They do great stuff as well. So,
thank you.
But you did a great job running that too, Eric. So yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you, Eric, for your insights and chatting about this this very interesting case. So I guess the message we can send out is you know, don't get duped by an art collector. You know,
that's right.
That's the final message we like to deliver. But
beware of those paying in cash, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Don't get duped in Morocco. If you ask me to go to Morocco, I don't know. I might think about it twice. Actually, I would trust you. You've got some credentials, so yeah.
Thanks, Michael.
But to everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to get to the follow-up questions in the chat as well. And like I said, stay tuned for a full agenda, full lineup for next year. Definitely excited to kick things off fresh for next year with some new topics and things like that. So everyone have a great holiday. You know how to reach me if you need to. This is Dr. Fraud. Take care, everybody.
Bye now.